Hello and welcome once again to the Mood of the Nation. That's right, India Today's biannual survey that's been going on for more than a decade. The survey that the country looks forward to twice a year. And remember, it's been a dramatic year, and this is the survey that puts its finger on all the hot button issues of the last 12 months.
In terms of massive events of huge national importance, there couldn't have been a more significant year than this. You've had an aggression from China, you've had an economy which is in recession, you've had a worldwide pandemic which we're suffering from, and it'll be very interesting to know over the next several minutes what the mood in the nation is. Let's get started, Rajdeep, by showing our viewers the methodology that's been used by Karvy Insights, our pollster, for this Mood of the Nation poll. This is a national sample of 12,232 interviews. Unlike the last time in August 2020, this time round it's a mix of face-to-face in-person interviews and CATI or telephonic interviews. So there is a substantial element of on-the-field surveying over here. The survey was carried out between the 3rd to the 13th of January 2021. And this is across 194 assembly constituencies and 97 parliamentary constituencies across the country. It really gives you a sense of which way the political hawa is blowing in this country and what might happen if elections are held right now. So what we'll do right now is focus in the first part of this broadcast on what would people's perception be around the government's handling of the COVID pandemic, because that's the one issue, Rajdeep, that everyone's grappled with throughout the last year.
That's right. For the last almost 12 months now, India and the world have grappled with COVID-19. So we thought that we will start the Mood of the Nation by giving you a sense of how the nation is looking at the Prime Minister's handling of COVID-19. Take a look at these numbers. Prime Minister Modi's handling of COVID-19, the first data points from Karvy Research for India Today. Outstanding, say 23%, that's about 1 in every 4. 73%,
no,
50% are saying good. So a total of 73% are rating the Prime Minister either as good or outstanding. Average is 18% and poor is 7%. Very poor is 2%. So if you add that, that's about 27% who are giving the Prime Minister a thumbs down, but 73%, a massive majority in that sense, are giving a thumbs up.
This is an incredible data indicator because it shows despite all the adversity that people have had to deal with, the voters, according to this Mood of the Nation opinion poll, are satisfied with how the Prime Minister and the government have dealt with COVID-19. You can't be a bigger challenge, and if on this challenge, this is the level of approval, it's quite incredible.
That's right. And it's not just the Prime Minister himself. We've also compared him to global leaders across the world. And Rahul, you want to give us a sense of where the Prime Minister stands when it comes to global leaders and their handling of the COVID-19
So
pandemic.
I just want to first explain the data that you'll see on your screen. This is taken from the latest World Economic Forum release, which is based on Pew data. Pew is a research agency in the United States. So we've picked the data from the research agency, and then we'll show you what the MOTN data tells us about the Prime Minister's handling in a global context. So there are some countries like Canada, like Australia, like Germany, where the leaders have higher ratings than our Prime Minister does. But if you come into countries that you can really compare with India, which are roughly in the same socio-economic bracket, there the Prime Minister is leagues ahead. For example, in the United States, which you'd expect would do much better than India when it comes to dealing with a pandemic where healthcare facilities are better, only 47% of the people thought that the then President Donald Trump had done a good job. 52% thought he'd failed. In the UK, Boris Johnson has an approval rating of only 46% on his handling of the COVID pandemic. 54% think he's done a bad job. In Spain, again, 54% think the leader's done well. 47% think he's done badly. Emmanuel Macron in France has an approval rating of only 59%. 41% say he's doing badly. Now, given our healthcare facilities, the level of general awareness in dealing with a virus, this is an incredible performance by the Prime Minister in this huge year where we're dealing with this pandemic.
You look at Australia and Germany as the two countries where their leaders are rated even higher really than the Prime Minister. But if you look at, as Rahul pointed out, the US, the UK, Spain, France, countries that have struggled and are continuing to struggle with the pandemic, the Prime Minister has done much better. And maybe that's the first talking point, to bring in our guests to get their first reactions to how they perceive the Prime Minister's rating of COVID-19. We are joined by Dr. Ajoy Kumar of the Congress Party, Nupur Sharma of the BJP, Dr. Naresh Trehan of Vedanta joins us, Dr. Sanjeev Bagai joins us, and I'm also joined by
Sonali Acharji.
She's
with the India Today magazine, and she's been working on bringing this part of the survey together. So we'll have different members of our team at the India Today magazine joining us to help explain what they've been working on, and Sonali can talk about the COVID pandemic. I want to go across to Naresh Trehan first, because the challenges are monumental. You can't have a more challenging year for any government than what we've dealt with over the last 12 months. And despite that, 73% people think that Prime Minister Modi has handled the COVID pandemic either outstandingly well or his performance has been good. What do you make of this?
Well, I think they're right on the button. This poll shows that, if you want to compare our Prime Minister's performance with the rest of the world, the only comparable countries are the ones that have populations equal to us or at least near us. So the basic thing is, when you talk about Australia, which has 25 million people, or some other, Germany, which has 50 million or whatever, the point is that to be so decisive and so early in the game is what saved India. This misery that the United States and UK have gone through. So the fact that there were three facts facing us at that time, they were staring us in the face. One, that the infrastructure to take care of people when they got sick was wanting, or hugely wanting. Second, we didn't have the technology or the protective equipment that we needed. Third was that there was a population which was sort of so mixed, it's got so many tiers to it, that how to actually make it happen, that you lock down, keep them in place. There was a little mishap with the labor that got caught in the middle of it. That was very tragic. But the rest of it worked very well. The fact those 3 months helped us to build the infrastructure, get the technology in place, and then be able to take care of our people, and then continuous stressing on masking, distancing and all that has all helped. So I think, in short, the Prime Minister did do an outstanding job by being so decisive so early in the game.
Also significantly, the poll was done at a time when the vaccine was about to be launched, was done at a time when India's numbers are significantly down, particularly compared, let's say, to a United States and indeed to large parts of the world. So there is a slow feel-good factor that this poll seems to suggest when it even comes to handling of COVID-19. To that extent, Dr. Ajoy Kumar, do you accept that the opposition today would find it very difficult to target the Prime Minister on the handling of COVID-19?
I think you've hit it spot on. Couple of observations on these data points. One is that if you look at the heads of state of Germany, and China is obviously out of this discussion, but South Korea, Taiwan, so how do they respond? And we don't have to look into exponentially and start predicting how great the response was. The Prime Minister is also the sum total of what the states have done. So when we slice the Prime Minister's performance, are we slicing the performance of Kerala, Maharashtra, Delhi, other states in India? Is also an important perspective to keep in mind, because much as we like to give the Prime Minister credit, as often as possible people do try to do that. I would also urge Rajdeep to also look at how the states have responded.
Okay, let me give that. You raised an important point, and maybe we need to give that point as well. How did state governments handle COVID-19? Take a look at the numbers in the mood of the nation. 20% are saying outstanding, 50% are saying good. State governments handling of COVID-19, 20% are rating it as outstanding, 50% good. So 70% are also giving a lot of credit to state governments. Remember, 73% good outstanding for the Prime Minister, 70% for the state. So state governments also coming out well. Average is 20%. Poor is 7%, very poor is 2%. So it appears, and Ajoy Kumar seems to suggest, so don't give the credit only to Prime Minister Modi, also give it to Chief Ministers. You want to respond to that, Nupur Sharma, that this is being seen as a collective effort where both the states and the centre seem to have worked effectively?
Good evening, Rajdeep, Rahul, panelists, and to all viewers. Now, of course, given that all of us living today faced a pandemic of this magnitude for the first time, nobody actually knew what a pandemic actually entails and how it can affect economies and lives and everything related to it. However, I think I would agree with the Prime Minister that he was looking at cooperative federalism. But at the same time, I would also say that if the Prime Minister did not lead from the front, everybody was actually quite lost. I will obviously congratulate a few states who have handled the pandemic really well. Initially, you remember when the first few cases came along, how Kerala managed it really well, but thereon they lost the way somewhere. Delhi supposedly managed well, but thereon twice the central government had to intervene. Maharashtra has been a big question mark, I would say that. However, in totality, you have to understand that I do know there have been state governments who were adamant on hiding the number of infections. Not only infections, but COVID deaths. They had a subcommittee and an overreaching committee from the government who decided whether a patient died of COVID or not, and not of doctors exactly. And you know exactly what happened. There have also been instances wherein you remember there was a lot of laborers trying to get to their home states, and how I can tell you, I have the official figures from the rail department, how roughly 1,500 trains or 1,300 trains were actually demanded by a state of Maharashtra, but some 283 actually went empty. So there have been problems. There have been some issues where politics was trying to be played, which was unfortunate. But overall, I would say, if you were to compare India to other countries, we have done really well with only 10.6 million infections in a 138 crore population. I think you compare it to any country, I think we've done remarkably well in controlling
You know, I want to come to a part of the study which really makes it that much more significant when it comes to you studying how people perceive the government's performance. And this part of the study deals with the impact that the COVID pandemic had on the economic status of people. So we asked them, did you suffer personally? Was there a decrease in your income? And 66% of the respondents, 2 in 3 people we spoke to, said their income had come down. 19% said they'd lost their job, which means about 85 people out of 100 had been impacted in some way dramatically. Either their income came down or they just lost their job. Only 12% said that there'd been no change, and 3% said their income had increased. Now, this is what makes this stunning, that you think that the government and the Prime Minister are doing a great job when you yourself are suffering immensely on the financial front, Rajdeep.
Because if you look at the next, very next graphic, Rahul, which is the centre's handling of the economic distress due to COVID. So people have admitted that their incomes have decreased. 2 in every 3 have admitted that. Lost jobs is 1 in every 5. That's about 85% have had income decrease or lost job. But ask them, centre's handling of COVID economic distress, outstanding 20%, good 47%, average 22%, poor 8%, very poor 2%. So the same people, it appears, who have suffered are also saying, no, the centre has done a reasonable job of handling the economy.
No, not reasonable. 67% think they've done well. Now, this is not Balakot, this is not the Ram Mandir or Jammu and Kashmir, where it's based on a narrative or it's based on perception. This is based on how you feel about a certain decision of the government, because it impacts you directly. Nothing that the government can or cannot do impacts a person more than having to deal with the virus, because each person is dealing with it. Whereas on Article 370, you're not dealing with it personally. Sanjeev Bagai, what do you make of the fact that about 85% of the people say either their income came down or they lost their job, and yet they think, given this adversity or despite the adversity, the government has done a good job?
Good evening, everyone. I think it's a recognition of what was done correctly. I'll break it up very quickly into 5 different components. I think this is a once-in-a-century pandemic which all of us have faced. I think the nation understood what we were dealing with. We, from a government point of view, state point of view, and the medical fraternity point of view, we appreciated what the government done was to navigate through the initial phase, because it was completely going into an unknown storm. Aviate, because the day-to-day situation was dynamic and changing. We negotiated the difficult paths, put lives ahead, followed by livelihood, and then looked at various other aspects. Communicate well with the country, and last was innovate. Now, the communication was scientific based. There was less amount of misrepresentation. He relied on scientific facts, doctors, researchers, ICMR. We are dealing with a huge crisis of an ever-bulging population with limited infrastructure as far as healthcare is concerned. Yes, people lost their jobs, their pay cuts were there, and other aspects were there. But if you look at the end point, we have the lowest case fatality in terms of mortality in most parts of the Western world. If you look at a corrected number with, let's say, India versus US, with regards to population and the patient per 1,000 patient bed ratio, we have about 90 to 92% lesser case fatality than US.
But people have lost.
That's a remarkable achievement.
But people have lost their livelihoods.
All the states.
But let's be very clear. Income decreased 66%, lost jobs 19%. 4 in every 5, more than 4 in every 5 have in some way their livelihoods have been affected. You're now telling us that this poll seems to suggest that people are applauding the government for saving lives, are worried about livelihoods, and at the same time are not willing to suggest that the center mishandled.
No, but it's not just about saving.
It's not. It seems, I would like to know how. I still don't have a rational explanation for that, Rahul. I can understand people supporting the government for its handling of the pandemic. But when you've lost your livelihoods and still are saying the center's handling of the economic distress, 67% are saying good or outstanding.
So people aren't just thanking the government for saving their life. They actually believe that the government did a good job on handling the economic situation caused by the COVID disruption.
Even while having lost their livelihoods.
Despite having lost their livelihoods.
That's the question.
But that's the data that is coming out.
Sure.
And that baffles the imagination, because if you've just lost your job or your income's taken a hit, surely you don't like what's happening. But Ajay Kumar, that just shows the kind of credibility the Prime Minister has and the kind of challenges the opposition has to deal with this man who, despite everything, despite people losing their job or taking a hit on their salaries, voters believe that he's done a good job.
No, the question again is the way you look at data, Rahul. I mean, I think one is that the biggest danger in democracy is hagiography. The second danger is that you look at your state's data. Why aren't you going hammer and tong saying what a great chief minister India has got? Because the same data, so what Ms. Sharma of BJP was saying, I find it very, you look at one data and say it is great, 70% approval, COVID reaction, Prime Minister is a great guy. Then you look at the same 70% good and outstanding of state and say, oh, by the way, there's nothing to it. So you have to decide what data you want to look at. I'm amazed, honestly, Rahul, I'm amazed with the sheer lack of either the ability to analyze. Because here is the data which clearly says, so please go around saying all the state chief ministers did an outstanding job. Then I can understand the hagiography. But I can't understand when you say the state. So if you see the state data on the jobs also, and if all the states...
No, so Ajay Kumar does have a point, Nupur Sharma, and you have to give that to him, because 20 versus 23, 20% in the state think the government did an outstanding job, 23% of the center think the government did an outstanding job, and when it comes to good, it's 50 versus 50. So it's 70 versus 73 in total. 70% think the state governments did well, and 73% believe that the central government did well. Ajay Kumar uses that data to make the argument that you can't just say the PM is doing a great job. Even the state governments have been appreciated in the same data set.
No, but I don't understand what his point is, because a lot of states are also ruled by the BJP. My point simply is, I don't know what your questionnaire entailed. I don't know if this MOTN is actually on one CM space, or maybe perhaps mood of the nation on how Didi is doing, or how Uddhav Thackeray ji is doing, or somebody else is doing. Your MOTN, from what I understood, is perhaps in the Prime Minister.
It's gone across states. It's gone across states, whether BJP or non-BJP ruled states. The general sense one is getting that people are appreciating leadership. whether it's at the center or at the state level, people are appreciating leadership in tough times.
But that's the question I actually answered in my last bit when I said even the Prime Minister congratulated. In fact, if you remember, before lockdown regulations, before they were coming, there were 4 or 5 BCs that the Prime Minister held with the Chief Ministers. In fact, he urged them, because state by state there are different circumstances, there were different number of infections, and there were different rural-urban divide. And he asked them, how do you want to go about lifting lockdown restrictions? And you need to understand that of a pandemic and with a population of this large a scale, that kind of cooperative federalism was absolutely necessary. But I am going to actually come back to my point, and I want
you all to come and possibly from India Today, Sorali, who's there, can explain this to us. You know, what is baffling, as to use the word that Rahul used, is that impact on economic status, 66% income decrease, lost job 19%, that's 85%, and yet people are rating the Prime Minister's performance or the centre's performance of handling the economic distress due to COVID. Remember, due to the lockdown, 20% outstanding, 47% good. That's still 67%. So it seems that even when you're losing your livelihood, you're still willing to give the benefit of the doubt to the government's handling of the crisis. Explain that to us.
Okay, so I had visited a few families in Chandni Chowk who had been affected by COVID and had been affected by the economic distress. They ran restaurants and they had to shut down. Some of them didn't get their workers back, and they were struggling to make ends meet, but they were also infected with COVID. And what one particular family told me really stands out, because they said the way in which the health authorities handheld them through this pandemic, the way in which rations were delivered, the way in which senior members were taken care of. You know, one of them had a father who was a cancer survivor and he survived COVID. They said that they have a lot of faith. What this government gives them is hope, that they believe that if they can save them from a virus where, you know, their family members could have died from it, and where it was so hopeless for them, they really thought their father would die, they can also eventually help them get over this economic crisis.
So what you're suggesting is that they put a primacy on the saving of lives even ahead of livelihoods. Because when I look at impact, and this is important, impact on economic status, and we break it down, because remember the images of migration, of people leaving their homes, those were images that stunned the nation. And if you look at income decrease, 69% workers say their income has decreased. 66% farmers say their income has decreased. 65% self-employed say their incomes have decreased. 65% businessmen say so, and 61% service sector. So across the board, there is clear evidence of economic distress. Jobs lost, 21% among workers, 17% among farmers, 19% among self-employed, 24% businessmen have perhaps had to shut down, and 19% service sector. So now there is economic distress, but people are giving the benefit of doubt.
But two things stand out in the data you just read out. One, that it's businessmen whose livelihoods have been most badly impacted because their businesses have had to shut down. 24% who declared themselves as businessmen in this data set said they've lost their jobs. They've had to shut down whatever
across
enterprise.
The board, Rahul, there is economic distress across the board.
But 24 is more than the others. For example, farmers have been least impacted at 17. But if you come on the other side, it's workers who had to take the biggest hit on salary. So it's workers who've been most impacted, and it's those who are in the service sector holding steady jobs. They're the ones who say that their income is least impacted, relatively speaking.
So it appears that in March, April last year, the Prime Minister or indeed the governments took a conscious choice, both at the centre and states, to put lives above livelihoods. We needed to save lives. We'll deal with livelihoods later. And the harshness of the lockdown was criticized by many, but clearly in this mood of the nation, people are willing to give, as I said, the government the benefit of doubt. Putting lives over livelihoods, Dr. Trehan, was there a wise strategy in hindsight, or do you believe that we could still pay a price for it?
Absolutely. There's no debate on that in my mind. First of all, this is a worldwide phenomenon. So you can't, if anybody you can blame the Chinese. You can't blame the government or anybody for it having happened. The magnitude of it, everybody appreciated. We were all scared. The frontline workers were on the job. Crores of healthline workers stood their ground, saved lives. There was a lot of decisive thinking going on at the Prime Minister's level, at the government level, and it was cooperative. All the committees had a good interaction between the private sector and the government sector in
No,
the
what
healthcare
happens to the
space,
loss
how
of
to move forward.
livelihoods? No, Dr.
No,
Trehan,
just
the United States, States appeared under Trump to put livelihoods above lives. They wanted to, Trump was credited with getting the economy on track, but America was in a shambles when it came to the healthcare sector.
Rajdeep,
India, the reverse seems to have happened.
No, Rajdeep, you're debating this, and that I'm coming to that debate itself. That people have suffered hugely, no question about that. But in spite of that, the reason why they're not blaming the government for it is because it was not government made. It is not any bad decision by the government that wreaked havoc. Yes, as I said, there was a mishap for the laborers who got caught in the middle of it. That was terrible. But it also shows you how civil society came together with the government to give them as much succor as they could. So the basic thing is the nation really performed well. It's not only the government was the direction, it was I said the Prime Minister is to be complimented for his decisive thinking. That we did the lockdown and we did not worry about how we'll take care of it because it saved millions and millions of lives. If millions and millions of lives got lost in the middle of it, any amount of economic recovery would not have helped. Now we have the chance that people have lost their jobs. They have done, I mean, you can't imagine the misery it has wreaked on people. We must all understand that and actually try to bring it all back.
That's interesting, Dr. Trehan, but let's look at the next data point, the impact of that lockdown, which was so criticized by the opposition in particular. What impact did it have? 39% say it contained the spread. When it comes to the question of contained the spread but caused problems, say 28%. Not effective, say 13%. Damaged the economy, say 10%. Contained the spread but damaged the economy, say 7%. So what you are seeing, and Dr. Ajoy Kumar, you really need to answer this because there is a sense that the opposition, the Congress in particular, believe that the lockdown itself was a bad idea in terms of its harshness. It was seen as draconian. At 96 hours notice, the country was being shut down. People seem again to be suggesting at least it contained the COVID spread.
Look, you had a lockdown, whether the lockdown definitely contained the COVID spread is a given. We were not objecting to the lockdown being implemented. I think the way we prepared for it, and that's why it led to miseries like Dr. Trehan correctly said, and everybody rightly said, and I don't think it's a Congress-BJP issue. It's an issue whether the migrant people suffered, whether everybody else suffered, whether could we have been announced it with a greater period, because whatever the date in which it was set is okay. We have no issues on that, and I think it definitely helped and the lockdown was the only tool we had in our quiver, in terms of in our arsenal. The only tool we had at that time was lockdown. Across the world, the epidemiologists, the physicians, all the people were grappling with this issue. The issue was, did anybody else in the world do it this way? I don't think so. Whether they announced it in a phased manner, they announced it and were better prepared for it. And
no,
even if you look at the...
But can I make a counterpoint, Rajdeep? My point is this, it comes...
Rahul, I'll just finish off.
Go on.
Rahul, I'll just finish off with 5 seconds. So I'm just saying that if you're looking at it, if I remember the number you said is 39%, and so that leaves us 61% who don't seem to be very excited about it, and saying that it's either it was not done well, or it was, so it's 61 versus 39%. That's what if I remember the numbers you've just read out, Rajdeep. So, hey, 39%, is it a pass mark? I mean, when I gave the 12th standard exam, 40%.
Sir, the fact is a majority have believed it contained the COVID spread, and therefore I come back to it. People seem to have put lives over livelihoods. That's the reality.
No, but can I give a counter, Rajdeep?
Yes.
It comes down to belief. People have the highest level of belief in what the Prime Minister is doing, his intention, his actions, Nupur Sharma, whether somebody likes it or not.
Also, I think as we are seeing across the world, in times of pandemics, people's faith in leadership actually increases.
Not necessarily.
In
Boris
most
Johnson,
parts of the world,
Bolsonaro,
and Trump and Bolsonaro are the three outliers there. These are the three leaders who have seen to have failed. across the world, people like the idea of strong leaders. Otherwise.
I want to.
Yeah, go on,
May I
Nupur.
please? Yes, please. I want to actually go back to the question before the break we took. Well, you need to understand when you're talking about losses of jobs and yet people voting in favor of the Prime Minister, you need to understand that in a country as large as ours, almost 84 crore people were fed under the Garib Kalyan Yojana. And I don't know how many countries were doing social service of this magnitude, that they were delivering 25 kilos of ration, pulses, wheat and rice to families. And that's a fact. People were not going to sleep on an empty stomach. And secondly, I remember from last year, by September, our factory output was at an 8-year high. By October, our sales of two-wheelers and cars were at a 2-year high. And at the same time, service sector, private service sector jobs were as good or as big as pre-COVID times. So what I'm trying to say is that the economy certainly picked up. IMF has given us 8.8%
throwing up mixed numbers,
growth.
but we'll get into the economy separately. It's not quite as rosy as Nupur is projecting, but the fact is
but that's with every other country.
Sure.
Which country has not seen
I'm not arguing
a
with
bad
that.
economy?
Sure, I'm not arguing with that, but I'm just saying that it's a fact that people have a level of faith that I haven't seen, that I didn't believe was possible. They just have faith that this man, for us, is doing the right thing. That's the Fevicol ka faith.
It's almost Teflon-like when you look at it. But clearly, and this is the first big takeaway from the survey, when it comes to COVID-19, by and large, it's a thumbs up for Prime Minister Modi, the centre, and indeed state governments as well. Leadership has been applauded by and large in these tough times.
So, are people in India willing to take the vaccine? How excited and enthusiastic are citizens about getting inoculated? How many are naysayers? How many are vaccine hesitant? Find out when we come back in the first national trend line on that one question that has engaged us so often. Are you willing to take the COVID vaccine? Find out what the rest of the country thinks.